Good afternoon, I'm Jocelyn Kennedy. I'm the Executive Director of the Harvard Law School Library. I'm going to talk really fast so that we can maximize our time with Professor Crawford. Thank you to the Dean's Office for providing us with lunch. They really make this event happen. You are being recorded. This talk will be broadcast on our YouTube channel next week, including the Q&A period, so you are on notice that you are being recorded. So I'm going to be really quick. Susan Crawford is one of our professors. She's amazing, the John A. Riley Clinical Professor of Law here at Harvard. She is one of the bright voices around technology, right? She's really contributing meaningfully to this area of scholarship. I first met her in 2008. It's delightful to be back with her here at Harvard. So without further ado, Professor Crawford to talk about her new book, Fiber.
Well, hello everybody. The great thing about having a book and being able to talk about it is that you get to see your friends. And in New York City, I had my freshman roommate there, and that was amazing. In DC, my best friend from law school was there. And here, there are a lot of students, which means so much to me. My job is the best because I get to meet the future every single day. And you're it. I'm also really touched that my mother is here, Dorothy Crawford, who lives in Cambridge, accompanied by the wonderful Jane Alexander, who's a terrific person and a joy in every way. Dorothy's the author of 3 books. She wrote about expressionism in music, jointly authored with my father, and a book about a wonderful concert series in Los Angeles, contemporary music on the roof. It was called Evenings on and Off the Roof. And her 3rd book was about all the emigre musicians who fled Hitler and came to Southern California. And it's called A Windfall of Musicians. So it's great you're here. Also touched by the obituary of Carol Channing recently, who said in her mid-70s, Shirley Temple peaked at 7. I haven't gotten myself together yet. And this journey working on fiber has been the personal growth Olympics for me, gotta say. If you had met me in law school, I probably wouldn't have known how to talk to you and might have been just silent and pretty nervous about whether I was coming off all right. I've been growing up ever since then, and actually I have a few stories from New York City where I spent a lot of my time. My dry cleaner loves fiber. Loves the book because he's had a ton of trouble with Verizon. He can't seem to get a good connection going. And last summer he had to wheel his clothes on a big rack down 6th Avenue in order to record them on a computer in another shop because there was no connectivity on 6th Avenue and 10th Street in Greenwich Village. So he said to me the other day, fiber is amazing, and his eyes just lit up with this technology. That same day I went to a music store. I'm an amateur violist, and was picking up the instrument, and I started talking to the people in the shop about fiber optic. And I said, imagine that 1/2 of a string quartet is playing in Manhattan, and the other half is playing in Miami, and you feel as if there's just a pane of glass between you and your colleagues. You can make eye contact, there's no delay, you're actually playing together. And their eyes widened. They said, is this possible? And I said, well, how can we do this? And we started off in the policy questions. But then I went into the subway in New York City, which is always richly populated by every corner of life in the city. Everybody was there, and the car was pretty crowded. And then the doors flashed open, and a huge troop of completely charming 4th graders came in the door. And they were bumbling around and kind of making a mess and giggling and falling all over each other. And all the people in the car smiled and made way for them and smiled at each other and were completely kind. When you're writing a book, everything in the world appears to have something to do with the book. And when you're talking about it, the same thing is true. And that subway car felt like that. Americans at their best are never cynical. And they do care about giving respect to everyone. Another, and that's the story of this book, which I'll get to in a bit. Another New York story, I got an email from a friend of mine, a painter in New York, and he said, I heard you on the radio. only you can make fiber sound sexy. And again, if you had known me a few decades ago, impossible to imagine that such a statement would be made. So that was great. And speaking of sexy, I was obediently exercising yesterday. You may not know this, but you have to exercise 6 days a week for the rest of your life. And I was doing that on the elliptical machine and watching Dr. Zhivago, fabulous movie. And there's this great scene where they're in a house. Omar Sharif, right? And the beautiful Julie Christie are in this house immured in snow and ice. And outside, the wolves are howling. And the red and the white guards are fighting with each other. You can hear gunfire. Yeah, scary, right? And Omar Sharif, I can only think of him that way, sees, as if in a vision, in that same house, inside, there's a clean desk and a single candle with a lit flame and ink and a pen. And he lights up. He goes to the table to write. He's a poet, you may remember. Julie Christie gets up. She's terrified. She says, "Yuri, the wolves are howling outside." And Omar Sharif says, "I know, they're just frightened. Listen carefully." And then she says, and I wrote it down to get this right. She says, "Oh Lord, this is an awful time to be alive." And he says, no, it isn't. Because he's thinking of his power to write and to have hope and that clean desk and that ink. Because in working on local policy, which is where I've been spending a lot of my time these days, the red and the white guards may be fighting with each other. The wolves are howling out of fear. But there is a lot of hope for cities in particular, working on these basic issues of equity and fairness that are implicated by fiber. So there's three themes I want to touch on. It's a very brief talk, and then I want to have a nice conversation with you. I like alliteration, so they are context, courage, and China. So let's start with the context. I launched this project about 6 years ago. I needed a shtick for a speech I was going to give in Manhattan to a bunch of people who basically hate technology. And I decided to go to South Korea to gather material. This was the winter of 2012-13. And when I got there, I found something surprising. I have never been embarrassed to be an American. I'm very proud of being an American. I'm thoroughly American. But I was told there by people that coming to America for them was like taking a rural vacation because life was so unconnected here. My job in South Korea during that winter was to interview a bunch of 20-somethings about their lives. I learned a tremendous amount. But I also learned that I had been living in the past, essentially, in America. I later went to Stockholm, and the mayor of Stockholm grabbed me by the elbow and said, "What can we do to help?" Because America's in such trouble, really drifting into irrelevance. I became interested in cities. I went to Tokyo and Oslo and Hong Kong, Singapore, lots of places to find out what accounted for this story. Why was it that connectivity, sort of access to the internet, was so cheap, so persistent, so reliable? What had gone wrong in America to get us to this situation? Because the numbers, and here come some numbers, are really pretty bad. The OECD says that when it comes to adoption of fiber optic, this crucial technology, the United States ranks 25th out of 36 developed nations. And the World Economic Forum says that when it comes to infrastructure readiness for the new industries of the future, the US is number 27 on the list. We're really not in the game. Good, I got a look of surprise from Kevin over there. It is astonishing, and it all has to do with the story behind this book. Right now, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore have basically 100% fiber adoption. They assume very cheap connectivity available to everyone, basically about $25 to $40 a month, essentially unlimited capacity both for uploading and downloading. Things just work there. And by contrast, today, and not just to be colorful, I wrote a check to Comcast in Cambridge for $107, right? And there's no choice. And it's not a very good service. There are only 3 wires you need to know about for this story, the context. Copper was the original phone network and was the envy of the world when we first lit it up in the United States. No longer really a good medium for high-speed data. People are fleeing it in huge numbers. Most urban areas of the United States are controlled by a single cable monopoly. 90% of census areas in the United States have at most one choice of a high-capacity provider, and usually in urban areas it's your cable guy, as in Cambridge. And many people in rural areas are being left behind entirely. So we're suffering from a number of digital divides between rural and urban, between poor people in urban areas and richer ones, and then between the United States and Asian countries and the Nordics. And the China story, which I'll tell in great detail in a few minutes, is really something. They are planning to connect, in very short order, 80% of their homes and businesses to fiber. And through the Silk Road Initiative, we'll be touching 65% of the world's population with their controlled high-capacity network services. So this didn't happen by accident. We've made a series of policy mistakes in the United States, and a lot of this is in a book called Captive Audience that I wrote back in 2012 and 2013. And if anything, it's gotten worse since I rolled out with that book, because we have completely given up on any form of oversight that would lead to competition, that would cause the cable actors to upgrade to fiber. And right now, Comcast already has 47% of the market for high-speed internet access in the United States, and we're a big country, and is thinking about having more, they said in their last earnings call. Their spending on capital, that is their investment in new networks or any upgrade, is down, just 14% of their revenue per year. And Verizon, which does have some fiber in some leafy neighborhoods around the country, charges 3 times what you might pay in some of the Asian nations for a connection that's 10 times worse. So we're paying a lot for second-class services, and we don't have a plan to upgrade to fiber. Now, there's a ton of fiber, you may be thinking, and you're right, in the United States. It runs between cities. All long-haul transmissions are carried by fiber, and between continents. Where it doesn't exist right now is in the very last bit. People call it the last mile, between your home or your business and a neighborhood node. Only about 13% when the wind is blowing of houses in the United States and businesses have access to fiber. And it's a very low number. Now, why did I get so excited about fiber? Well, when you read the book, you'll see I try to be the John McPhee of fiber. And chapter 2 takes me to Corning, where they gave me a wonderful tour to explain every detail of how this is made. And essentially, it's incredibly synthetically controlled, purely printed glass, thousands of layers that have been engineered precisely to have precise characteristics so that this channel is unbelievably pure and clear, so that when a laser sends a pulse of light through that clear channel of glass, it will go for dozens of kilometers without any boosting or encouragement or, help along the way. So once that glass is in the ground, as far as we know, it's infinitely upgradable, because then the science of photonics using that light to carry ever more information is advancing very quickly. And you just swap out the electronics at either end of the glass, but the glass stays there. And that's what these other more advanced countries are doing, and what we have not done in the last mile. We had this tremendous distribution bottleneck controlled by incumbent actors in the United States. And these are great American companies, but we've left them unconstrained, unrestrained, and we haven't set any standards for where we want to go as a country. So my dry cleaner is right. Fiber is amazing, and we have a giant bottleneck and no particular plan as a nation to do anything about this. But here's the story of courage. So another winter break, 1617, found me in Asheville, North Carolina, great place. And I was sitting there saying, I know all about this technology, but how am I going to tell the story? How can you possibly tell such a wonky story in a way that people will accept it and be interested by it? And I decided to go visit the scrappy cities in America that were building their own fiber networks. Today, there are 800 locations across the country that have either called for or built or involved in some form of publicly overseen, very high capacity network. And these are remarkable places full of characters and stories, and the great privilege of spending a ton of time in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Wilson, North Carolina. San Francisco also was working on a fiber network until the mayor died. We're hoping that that revives again later. I went to very, very rural areas in Wisconsin where 17 little tiny townships are pulling together to build fiber to the farm, and they're really proud of it. But this is happening all over the United States, and it was my great privilege to document what really is a movement. A movement that has a lot of understanding in the general populace, but isn't gaining resonance in Washington yet. I believe it will, because this story of courage should, in the end, make our federal government slightly embarrassed about its inability to make sure that everybody in America has this tremendous connection. What's stunning about the story is that we did exactly the same thing with electricity, which was, in the early years of the 20th century, completely controlled by a handful of private companies that had divided up the country, much like Comcast and Charter, and had chosen which areas to serve at what cost, meaning that by the 30s, almost no farmers in America had electricity, but rich kids in New York City were playing with electric toys. And poor people in most urban areas had very little access to electricity, and it was very expensive. It took enormous local courage initially, and then the leadership of FDR to ensure that electricity was brought to everybody. And today we totally take it for granted. Electricity, we turned on the lights. That didn't alarm us. Just another footnote on how cool fiber is. When people first saw electricity in the streets of the United States, men fell to their knees. It was so astonishing. And fiber is equally astonishing. It's really amazing. So I also found in these cities that there is a correlation between places that are able to care about everyone, able to have respect for everybody in their city, that would draw them towards making sure there's a public option that's cheap for connectivity. There's a correlation between that and then pivoting to take on questions like workforce development, searing unfairness in health outcomes among poor people, making sure that everybody gets a great education. I found that in places like Chattanooga and Wilson. Wilson, you can get fiber if you're in public housing for $10 added to your rent bill. You get a fiber connection because the city cares, right? Chattanooga really trying to take on its horrible issues of unfairness in the city. I also went to places where it was clear to me that they both didn't care about fiber and nothing was going to happen to make people of color, particularly their lives better in those cities. Greensboro, North Carolina is one of those places, and it's documented in the book. Just sort of a failure of leadership and imagination. Sometimes Americans don't want to be imaginative, and this is one area where they haven't been. Elizabeth Stevenson's writings have been very moving to me. She's recasting inequality. Take a look for her. She's at the University of Michigan. Recasting inequality as forcing us to look at what you need in order to lead a respected life, a thriving life. And this kind of thing, cheap connectivity at a low price, available without worrying about it, is one of those goods because, as I outline in the book, healthcare, lower the cost of hospitalization, be able to see a doctor without leaving your home. Elder care, be able to be in touch in an ambient way with your friends and relatives and have eye contact with them. That's what fiber makes possible, real empathy, real human presence, which we've never had across any other form, and we couldn't because there isn't enough data across either cable or copper wires. Education, being present in a classroom, not just sort of dropping in and viewing things from a fuzzy distance, but really being there. That's what fiber makes possible. And those are the goods that every American needs to lead a thriving life. So empathy, connection, new industries, new jobs. Cities are the places thinking about this and really maintaining democracy, gotta say, at this point. People still trust cities. This is a very bipartisan story, although the red and white guards may be shooting each other in Washington. At the local level, the fiber story is primarily a Republican story. These are places that just want their businesses and their people to do better. It has nothing to do with party politics. And we are at our most uncertain time since 1968 when it comes to worrying about what's going to happen to democracy around the world. This is the moment. And so this story gave me more insight to that at the local level, and it was a joy, really, and a privilege to capture it. So the third theme, after courage and after context, is China. Because I'm hoping maybe this story will be a Sputnik moment for fiber at the national level. Again, fiber is the mode of choice for China. They're going to wire most of their people to it. And the Silk Belt Road Initiative, let's just think about this for a moment. Touching 65% of the world's population will have an effect on 40% of the world's GDP. Well, that fiber is going to be attached to Huawei gear. You've probably seen stories about this in the paper. And that gear will be used to send out 5G advanced wireless services. Can't have 5G without fiber because there's so much data coming from the 5G small cells that are placed about every 200 feet that only fiber could carry it, could handle it, really. All right, so the Huawei gear will be there every 200 feet in urban areas along the Silk Road, and the whole point of the 5G protocol is to give the carrier control over what services run over that connection. That's what it's designed for. That wireless carriers are sick of being dumb pipes, and they want to make sure that you get their permission before your, let's say, your home security service or your telemedicine service or your education offering is allowed to go over their gear. All right, so to keep spelling this out, China does this, all the fiber's there, all the 5G is there, and American companies will have no leverage to be part of that market, won't be able to reach that global population. That's amazing. And we seem to have no response to this as a country. I have some answers. You know, I think that we should set a high standard for making sure that fiber is everywhere. I think probably the Fed should be involved in this. The whole last chapter is nothing but detailed policy recommendations. And we should make sure that it's just part of a thriving life in America to have a terrific and cheap connection. And we should make sure that our interconnections with our fiber network are neutral, so that a whole host of 5G operators can show up, not just Verizon and AT&T and the merged T-Mobile Sprint, because they're going to control areas. They're going to divide markets, just as we've seen in the wired marketplace. Verizon will take Sacramento, AT&T will take San Diego, and they will pick which services operate over their advanced wireless connections. That should be alarming. So we shouldn't let that happen. We should have fiber everywhere. And we should be, as we were in the past, the country that looks the rest of the world in the rearview mirror when it comes to the new industries, the new ways of making a living, and the human decency that is really at our core and should be attached to our technology policy as in other places. So this really has been a journey for me. I also want to deeply, I've just spotted her, recognize Laura Kremen-Adler, who's here, who worked very hard with me on the book. Thank you, Laura. Who's a PhD student in sociology, and set deadlines for me. If you ever write a book, have someone like this. It says chapter 2 is due March 6th. That really helped. Thank you. There's a quote in the book from somebody in Minnesota. It's Jerry Garcia. And Garcia says, somebody has to do something, and it's totally pathetic that it has to be us. Right now, it is true that it is cities and localities and cooperatives in the United States that are working on this crucial story, which is just as important as electrification. And there is hope. That candle that Omar Sharif is looking at, I don't want to be too cheesy about this, but actually, there is hope at the local level, and I'm hoping this bubbles up. And Ursula Le Guin said something important, too, about what you're writing against that candle. She says, in bad times, it's very important what you write. And so I was given this opportunity at a not great time in our history to write about something that I think is great. And it's been a joy to meet the people along the road, a joy to talk to students about it. And I can feel this movement happening. And I hope that you catch wind of it and become interested in it yourselves. I tried to make the story as approachable and fun as possible. So that was the story behind Fiber. Nonpartisan, giving respect to everyone, that's the point. So I'm grateful for your presence here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you. We've got a mic. Who's interested? Oh, no. Marcus, do you have a question? Yeah, here we go. I can still call on students. My class. Yeah.
How do you see the interplay between the T-Mobile Sprint merger and other policy with fiber coming together?
Well, okay, this is a great point to point out that there's a lot of bafflement, confusion, and just American public not caring about this whole set of issues. We're confused. We're told 5G is the future and all these ads about 5G, and nobody ever talks about fiber. If everybody in America understood the story, they would say, oh, T-Mobile and Sprint want to merge so that they can divide up the country with AT&T and Verizon and all get their separate territories to provide revenue-raising services. The whole point is to make more money from your existing infrastructure. Pricing power. That's what the carriers talk about when they talk to Wall Street. These will be very high-margin services that T-Mobile, Sprint want to offer. Now, it's being couched to the administration that we need this merger so that we can compete with China's rush towards 5G and the rest of the world. But actually, we'll get 5G whether or not these two companies merge. What we should be worried about is whether our 5G carriers are going to compete with each other, one, and they won't if there's 3 of them. Competition is more likely, although frankly we don't have much of it. Even with 4, we have a duopoly with a fringe. I love that phrase. So there's AT&T and Verizon, and then the rest guys are sort of also RANs. And we won't get this massive upgrade to fiber unless there's some concerted effort at the national level to set policy to do it. Because Verizon and AT&T have their own infrastructure in rich rural areas, rich urban areas that they will use for their 5G services, but it won't cover everybody. And it won't be open to every provider of advanced wireless, only to them. So if we really understood it, we would say, look, we've got to do a better job at infrastructure, and there should be widely available, wholesale, open fiber networks available for lease by lots of operators so that we have a competitive market for internet service provision, and open platforms for advanced wireless. And none of that is advanced by letting these two companies merge. So, anybody else? Oh, look, Martha.
This is fabulous.
Oh.
Thanks for your optimism and your warnings. Can you give us a glimpse of that last chapter? What's your most doable policy proposal, and what's the most out there?
The most doable would be to have the country, probably the FCC would have to do this, say, look, we're going to say fiber is the standard for every citizen. Right? And that just because you live in a rural area or you live in a poor area doesn't mean you get second-class connectivity. And we did that for both the telephone and electricity, and we haven't done it for high-speed internet access. We still view internet access as a luxury, something that some people get and not everybody gets. So that would be simple. That would just be a statement of principle. The hard thing then is the political battle in every state. So 19 states make it difficult or impossible for cities to have anything to do with fiber networks. And that happened because state legislatures are easily captured and gullible and believe that it is not fair to their private companies to let the government into any of this. When it came to electricity as an infrastructure element, following the Depression and huge amounts of graft and corruption in the electricity industry and sort of exploiting Americans right and left, nobody thought that the private market left to its own devices would deliver electricity at a reasonable cost to everyone in the country. That was just unimaginable. Our grandparents would never have believed that. But for some reason, we believe it about high-speed internet access. And so the political battle is saying, actually, there is a government role in ensuring, sort of upholding the regulatory ideal that by having a commodity, blank, just glass in the ground, network available everywhere that is overseen or controlled by government, that frees the private market to provide lots of different kinds of services and be competitive with each other. We have this funny religion in America right now that there's this choice between government control, which is terrifying, and the private market, which is blissful and, you know, rainbows and things. What's real in America is that actually we have neither state. We're sort of in this weird middle place with a series of private governments. And these companies have become that, essentially, when it comes to this communications infrastructure. So politically, there is quite a battle to do to say, actually, there is a role for the government here. That battle would have to be fought probably in every state. There would be lawsuits forever. It's still worth it. But it's out there. Yes. Oh, Mark, well, we might have another question. We should let somebody else. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
I've been a student of this topic for a very long time. Was involved in the
What's
early
your name?
days of high-speed internet and working for Continental Cable way back in the day.
What's your name?
My name is Will Beaton.
Nice to meet you.
And so I worked with the library here a long time ago when we first launched high-speed internet here in Cambridge, and it moved into the area. I was responsible working for Continental at the time, and it grew. So a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Couple of questions. I have often said to people when this topic came up in my circles that Canada had a really good model, being ignorant as to whether that's actually true or not, but I said it, that they had this notion of fiber optic as an infrastructure, and then service providers, content, internet, and what have you could be a competitive offering on that fiber. And therefore you had competition and prices would come down and it justified the whole thing. And why the heck can't we do that here in the United States? Now, so my first question is it true in Canada, and what other countries might have a model that works this way, the way we would fantasize it, right?
Yeah.
But the other question, that's almost more of a comment than a question, is that your book is centered around fiber. Fiber optics everywhere. And I have Fios. I understand, at least at a rudimentary level, the value of fiber. And I've had cable for years because I was in the cable industry for a long time. I understand the difference. My sense, though, is that you don't necessarily have to have fiber all the way into every single building in order to reap the benefits of this structural idea that we're talking about here, where you have fiber connectivity, infinite capacity in effect, to within a mile or a quarter of a mile or a tenth of a mile or 300 feet from your home. You could have some other technology like well-managed coax from there into your house that might be a little bit easier to at least bite off financially. So the question is, how much of this is a structural problem, i.e. the unlimited fiber and the ability to decide what services you want to get off of that, and how much of it is an actual technical problem, fiber or not, right?
Okay, let's take the second question first. Actually, it makes a big difference how close that fiber is, and it would have to go all the way into the basement. Right now, what we're seeing is Verizon's experimenting on a very limited basis with what they call 5G. They kind of made it up. It's their own protocol. And what they're doing is they have a line of sight wireless transmission to the outside of a home, and then they drill through the drywall, take a wire, and then put in something else inside the home, right? That's the only way, because 5G communications are very, very fast. They're very wobbling, many times a second, very high frequency. And those high frequency communications get nervous and shy when they approach a wall or a bag of water, like us humans, or trees or weather. And so if there's anything like that in between you and that wireless transmission, it gets interfered with. It's called interference. So yes, fiber coming close, but then it'd have to be right next to the building, I think, because any greater distance, something might get in its way. And in a lot of areas, there are trees and there's weather and things happening. And one of our risks as a national security matter, frankly, as a country, is that our communications network isn't particularly resilient. And we don't have a lot of redundancy. And so these proposals are also aimed at getting us a thicker, richer, better network. As to the models, really the best out there is Stockholm and the cities of Sweden, where they, in 1994, decided that it would be a good idea to get away from their local cable operator and their local phone operator who weren't upgrading to fiber, which was the world-class technology and still is and will be for the next 50 years. So and they're very neat people, Swedes. So they only wanted to dig up the streets once. And they put in a dark fiber network, which means no lasers, no light, just the glass. And it long ago paid for itself. And now they lease out that fiber, the city does, to a host of competing providers. And they make money for the city. It's so Swedish, it's so sensible. It's unbelievable. And you know, why would we wait? Singapore did the same thing. Both of these places are dense urban places, but Swedish little tiny villages in Sweden also have dark fiber. It's the model. It just makes sense to them. And so they just keep doing it. And it pays for itself and makes a lot of sense in terms of competition. Japan has a similar model, same with South Korea, where there's a basic network in place and lots of competition. Canada is not as happy a story as you might suggest. The line between wholesale and retail was drawn in the wrong place. There's a lot of game playing. There's a whole chapter in this book about shenanigans. There are shenanigans that are played, and once you understand them, this is just fun to watch the news and watch the shenanigans rolling out, and that has happened with telecom policy around the world. Really fun. Any women? There's always Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
My name's Jessica Deere. I'm a fellow at the Bergman Center, but I'm also a homeowner in rural Maine, and we're trying to organize to get fiber to the Blue Hill Peninsula. And I mean, there's so many different issues, but one of the issues that keeps coming up as our sort of broadband committee chairs from our 8 towns or whatever of square miles of about 700 square miles and 12,000 people, obviously, is that we don't have enough density to get the sort of regional carriers. They just won't talk to us. So we're partnering, trying to do proposals through USDA, et cetera. But one of the things that keeps coming up is these utility pole attachments.
Oh boy.
And I'm wondering why utility companies, which are, I think, sort of public goods in some ways, have the ability to raise the cost of installing fiber so much, because I don't understand why fiber is so expensive to install. So if you could shed a little bit of light on that.
Happy to do it. I'm so glad you raised. So pole attachments are operatic in their drama. They're blood and guts because they are a choke point where an incumbent of one kind or another can just refuse to allow you to attach, and they can charge whatever they want. And fees up the wazoo to pay for their own operations. So, you know, politically, that has to be fixed, and it has been very difficult. And some people choose to go underground, which is more expensive, just to avoid the uncertainty and game playing and shenanigans that go along with pole attachments. So that is the option. It's more expensive, but you don't have to wait forever. There's a tiny town in Massachusetts called Otis that has done this. I talk about them in the book. They are not only waiting for the local utility, but Verizon owns half the poles. And it's just bad news when the incumbent controls the poles. Look, this is irrational. This makes no sense. Why is the entire country paying rent to a few actors when, as a result, all of us are being held back from living in the 21st century? How could that be? And why do other American companies just let this happen? That's baffling to me. And what I'm hoping to do through the book and through all of you who are so able, and will go tell everybody you know about this, is get the business community, the American business community and the American, credit rating world to really understand this issue and take it on with more vehemence. So in 1932, electricity was the key domestic policy issue that FDR took on. Surprising, right? Because it was such a problem for the country. And I think we're having that same problem with internet access. There's just a lot of befuddlement. So people don't quite understand it, but you do. And so you will go out there and fix this with the American business community, I hope. Anybody else? Yes, in the back.
Hi, my name's Michael. I'm a resident and worker in Cambridge. And a few days ago, I Googled Municipal Broadband. And that led me to an article about Chattanooga. And by the time I read about Chattanooga, I was ready to tell my wife, okay, we're moving.
Yeah, it's lovely. You should go. It's great.
And I thought, wait a minute, I live here in Cambridge. And I heard rumors that somebody in Cambridge has been bugging the city council about making this happen here.
It's right there.
Seems like we ought to be able to make it happen here. So I was wondering if in your book you had a chance to talk to the Cambridge folks.
I really have to hand the mic over to you. Do you want to talk about what's going on in Cambridge? And tell everybody your name.
Hi, I'm Saul Tannenbaum. I'm a co-founder of Upgrade Cambridge, which is a grassroots group that's trying to do municipal broadband in Cambridge. We've been working on it for about a year now. It is an issue that has broad support. We're running a petition, upgradecambridge.org/petition. If you're a Cambridge resident, please sign. We have found almost no opposition. Our singular opponent is the Cambridge city manager, who believes municipal broadband will bankrupt the city. And, you know, on the contrary, you've been listening to what Susan said and listening for the dollars. It would be, you know, revenue positive if it was done right. We hope to make this a primary issue in the Cambridge elections, which are coming up this fall. And I can go into this in excruciating detail if you want to. Afterwards, I won't bore all the non-Cambridge residents. Upgradecambridge.org, and the petition is upgradecambridge.org/petition.
There's also, if anybody's interested, there's a wonderful website called muninetworks.org, which captures the hundreds of stories across the country. So there's a lot of this. It's the birth of progressivism, really, in its original state, which was just make sure everybody gets a respectable life. That's it. Not redistribute income necessarily, just give everybody a chance to lead a thriving life. Anybody else? There's in the front here? Or in the back? Whatever you want to do. How about one in the front and then one in the back?
Thank you, Professor Crawford. I just wanted to build up on the last question. What is the municipal revenue model? How do cities make money off of just having
Look, I don't want to lead anybody astray. This is a very high upfront cost, and 80% of the cost is labor to put the stuff in the ground. What they do is float a bond. This is infrastructure. It pays back slowly. You have to have patient capital, but it will pay back until the sun explodes. But you only get about 5 or 6% returns after, let's say, 10 years. So you'll see in the book a lot of bond mechanisms are described that would allow this to happen. It's not rocket science. You just lower the cost of capital. That's how you do it. I don't know about New Jersey. We have to find out about that. Yes?
Hi. So you've written about telecom and the cable industry, and you've now written about fiber. What's the next project?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. And in fact, I had a very confusing evening last night because I care so much about you and I only wanted to think about talking to you. But last night, the Charleston City Council was talking about flooding. And my next subject is sea level rise in Charleston, South Carolina. It's the same question. What is local government good for? What is the role of government? Here you've got a place in the deep South that is going to be Venice. But 5 million tourists dream of Charleston and go there every year. Incredible restaurants, beautiful place. No public transit, terrible public schools. Now they're facing water. And I see the seeds of progressivism there too. And I can tell from the conversation, which stretched deep into the night last night, because I was watching the city council the whole time, that they will come up with a plan that is going to address everybody's needs. But it's hard. It's a hard question. So my next project is to document this year in Charleston, South Carolina, and watch the mayor as he tries to get reelected without being very forceful about water. Again, everything I'm trying to do is to make these questions visceral. Fiber feels too techie, far away, but if it's about people's lives, maybe people will care. And water. Water is our dust bowl. You know, as it encroaches, it really calls into question the role of government and what we're supposed to be doing as a society to help everybody. So Grace, thank you for that question. It was very kind. Well, thank you all. I think we're done, and I really appreciate your kindness in being here. It means everything to me, friends, colleagues, and I hope to see you on the road in other places. Thank you.